I was 32 when Emma and her husband moved into the house next door. Quiet suburb, neat lawns, couples with golden retrievers and polite smiles. I kept to myself mostly. Work, gym, groceries, repeat. But the moment Emma stepped out of the moving truck, laughing at something Dan said, I noticed her. Everyone did. There was something soft about her. Not flashy or loud, just warm. The kind of woman who looked like she belonged in a painting hung over a fireplace. Dan, her husband, was the opposite. Boisterous, charming, always had a beer in hand and a story to tell. He waved at everyone, talked about stocks and golf. They seemed like a golden couple, picture perfect. I'd watch them from my kitchen, window sometimes, him grilling in the backyard, her reading with her legs curled up under her. She caught me looking once. Just once. She smiled. I looked away. We never spoke beyond a polite nod in passing. I never expected to be more than a silent observer, until the sirens came. It was a Wednesday night, cool air, still evening. I had just sat down with leftovers when the red lights danced across the walls. An ambulance, 2 police cars, the whole street seemed to freeze. I stepped outside with the others. Emma stood on her porch, barefoot, robe tight around her, talking to a cop. Her face was pale. She wasn't crying, just staring. The next day, the word spread. Dan had died in a car crash. Lost control on a wet road. Gone instantly. The neighborhood went quiet after that. For weeks, I didn't see Emma. Blinds drawn. No porch lights, mail piling up. People left casseroles, flowers, cards. I left nothing. What would I say? Sorry your perfect life shattered? I felt something I hadn't expected. Grief, yes, but also curiosity. I wondered what her silence meant. Did she miss him? Was she lost? Angry? Then, one night it rained. It was the kind of rain that makes everything feel slower, heavier. I was flipping through a book I'd read 3 times already when a soft knock broke the quiet. I opened the door and found her there. Emma. Her hair was wet, strands sticking to her cheek. She had no umbrella, just a hoodie and a bottle of red wine clutched like a lifeline. Her eyes were bloodshot, but not from crying. More like she hadn't slept in days. Can I come in? She asked, voice quiet, trembling. I stepped aside. She walked in without looking at me, like she'd done it 100 times before. She sat on the couch while I went to the kitchen, grabbed 2 glasses. I poured without asking. She took a sip and stared at the window, at nothing. The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was thick, heavy with things unspoken. He used to laugh in his sleep, she said suddenly. Dan. He'd dream about stupid things. One time he dreamed he was a pirate, woke up shouting yo-ho, and scared the hell out of me. I smiled faintly. Sounds like him. You didn't really know him. I didn't. Just what I saw. She looked at me then sharply. And what did you see? I paused. A guy who liked the spotlight. Emma laughed, a short, bitter sound. Yeah, that's accurate. We drank in silence again. Then she began to talk. About the funeral. About how people said the same things. How it all felt rehearsed. They talk like he was a saint, she whispered. They don't know. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't need to. Eventually, she grew quiet. Her shoulders sagged. She looked so small, curled into my couch. Her hand still held the glass, but it was tilted, forgotten. She mumbled something I couldn't catch. I leaned closer. What? I don't think I miss him, she said, eyes unfocused. Is that awful? I wanted to say no, but the words didn't come. She set the glass down, then lay back, curling into the corner of the couch. Her hoodie shifted slightly, revealing a bruise on her collarbone. Small, faded. I said nothing. She was already asleep. I covered her with a throw blanket and stood, there for a moment, watching her breathe. In the silence, I felt the shift, the kind you don't notice until later. Something had cracked open that night. Not loudly, not obviously. Just a hairline fracture in 2 broken people's lives. And it all started with a knock. After that first night, Emma began appearing more often. At first it was small things. A knock just before dinner, a request to borrow coffee, then returning to linger on the porch. Then came the longer visits, quiet dinners with barely touched food. Both of us swirling wine in our glasses but hardly drinking it. She never asked for anything specific. She never explained. She just showed up. We developed an unspoken rhythm. I'd be home around 6, and by 6:30 she'd be there. Sometimes with a book she thought I'd like. Other times with a pie. She baked but didn't want to eat alone. We'd talk about random things, movies, childhood, how awful hospital waiting rooms are. But always there was something beneath it. A weight between us. A pull that neither of us acknowledged. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, that I was being a decent neighbor, just being there for someone in pain. But it was more than that. I started looking forward to her texts. I caught myself listening for her knock, checking the window when the street got quiet. There were moments, split seconds, when her hand would brush mine while passing a plate, or her leg would rest too long against mine on the couch, and we wouldn't move. We'd just stay there, breathing. One evening, the sky had turned a soft golden gray, the kind of evening that makes you feel like the world is holding its breath. Emma arrived with a small smile and a worn paperback copy of The Bell Jar. We talked less that night. She seemed distant, distracted. After dinner, she stared at the book in her lap for a long time, then looked at me. "He cheated," she said, voice even. I didn't respond right away. "Dan," she added, her gaze fixed on her hands. "For years." I felt something shift in my chest. "I'm sorry," she shrugged. "I think the first time was maybe 2 years into our marriage. After that, I stopped keeping track." "Why did you stay?" Emma laughed, low and dry. "Because I was afraid of starting over, of what people would say, because it was easier to pretend." She looked at me then, really looked. "You ever feel like you were someone's backup plan?" I shook my head. "I noticed you," she said, so quietly I almost didn't hear it. "Before all of this, you were always quiet, but not in a sad way, just present." Her fingers reached for mine on the cushion between us. She didn't grab, didn't squeeze, just touched. The warmth of her skin against mine sent a pulse through me. I didn't move. Neither did she. Our eyes held each other, suspended. No words, just breathing. Closer now. Closer still. Her lips were inches from mine. I could smell the wine on her breath, see the tremble in her lashes, and then she pulled away. "I can't," she whispered, standing abruptly. "I'm sorry." She grabbed her bag and walked out the door. I didn't follow. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind spun in circles. What was I doing? Was I comforting a grieving widow or becoming something else entirely? A placeholder? A mistake she'd regret? I wasn't naive. I knew the difference between love and loneliness. But something about the way she looked at me lingered. Not with desperation, but recognition. Like she saw a version of herself reflected in me. The part that wanted to feel again. The days that followed were a blur of routine and second-guessing. I saw her less that week. No visits. No texts. The silence felt louder than her presence ever had. I found myself imagining her voice, remembering the shape of her hand on mine. I tried to distract myself, went back to the gym, worked late, deleted and rewrote unsent texts a dozen times. One night, well past midnight, just as I was about to turn off the lamp beside my bed, my phone buzzed. "Are you awake?" I stared at the screen, thumb hovering over the keyboard, and I knew. Whatever line we'd been dancing around wasn't gone. It was still there, waiting. The rain was loud that night. Not the gentle kind, but a hard, relentless downpour that made the windows shudder. I was still awake, sitting in the dim kitchen, nursing a cup of tea I didn't really want. I hadn't responded to her text. Wasn't sure if I should. But then I heard it. 3 soft knocks. I opened the door and there she was. Emma, soaked to the bone. Hair plastered to her face. Hoodie clinging to her skin. arms wrapped tightly around herself like she was holding something broken inside. "I can't be alone tonight," she said, barely louder than the rain. I stepped aside without a word. She walked in, dripping onto the hardwood. I grabbed a towel and handed it to her. She didn't move at first, just stood there, eyes searching mine like she was looking for permission to fall apart. I made her tea, turned on a playlist we both liked. Soft guitar, no lyrics. The kind of music that gives you space to feel things without pushing too hard. She sat on the couch, pulled the blanket over her shoulders, and watched the steam rise from her mug. "I used to lie awake at night," she said suddenly, next to him, wondering if he'd ever notice how lonely I felt. I'd wait for him to turn toward me just once, but he never did. Not even in sleep. She didn't cry. Her voice was flat, resigned, like she'd already cried all the tears a person can hold. "I think I started grieving before he died," she added. I sat next to her, not too close. Just enough that she could lean if she wanted to. For a long time, she said nothing else. Just sipped, stared, breathed. Then, without a word, she reached out and took my hand. Her fingers were cold. I closed mine around them. We didn't speak. The music faded. The room was still except for the sound of the rain. She turned to me. Her eyes searched mine again. But this time, there was no hesitation. She leaned in slowly, giving me time to stop it. I didn't. Our lips met. Soft at first, unsure, then deeper, slower. Her hand cupped my jaw, trembling slightly. I pulled her closer, felt her heartbeat against my chest. It wasn't frantic, it was quiet, raw, like a wound finally allowed to breathe. We made love in silence. Not urgent or wild, just present. Like we were speaking through touch all the things we didn't have the language for. When I woke, the light was soft and gold, cutting through the rain-streaked windows. Emma sat at the edge of the bed, already dressed in the same hoodie, her hair still damp. Her back was to me. I watched her for a moment before speaking. "You okay?" She didn't turn around. "I don't know." I sat up. "Last night." She nodded. "I know." She stood and faced me, her expression unreadable. "That wasn't a mistake," she said. "But it also wasn't a promise." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. She reached out, brushed her fingers over mine one last time, and said, "I need to go away for a while. Figure out who I am when I'm not someone's wife, or widow, or neighbor. Where will you go? Anywhere that feels honest." She smiled faintly, kissed my cheek, and walked out of the room. I watched from the porch as she got into her car. The rain had stopped. Everything was still wet, glistening under the morning sun. She didn't look back as she drove away. I stood there long after the engine disappeared down the road. The house felt quieter than it ever had. She had come to me in pieces, and maybe I'd helped her hold them for a while. But they weren't mine to keep. Still, she left something behind. An ache, yes, but also a kind of lightness. As I stepped back inside, I whispered to no one. She knocked on my door and opened something in me I didn't know existed. And then the silence returned. Not empty, just different.